counselor, board-certified psychotherapist and consultant Michael McGill. He's watching a video in school of shooting, and then that picture with the words, and no one's concerned. And the counselor knows that the family goes for target practice. Like, what would be normal for a counselor to do under these circumstances, Michael?
You know, you bring up some really good points, and this was a very passive situation. That's really what this is about. So let me go from the beginning. Counselors have a very difficult job. As a former school counselor, I'm in private practice and I do a lot of educational consulting. But the reality is that there's often one counselor for hundreds of students, especially at the high school level. You even heard the counselor say that statement that he had to deal with other seniors who were dealing with postgraduate plans. So oftentimes it's very difficult. But at this particular school, that is in a more affluent area. Last time I checked, they have about 9 support staff members, so about 6 counselors and 3 family liaisons or social workers of that sort. So there seems to be some resources that were there. Nevertheless, a difficult job. Hindsight is 20/20. We all know that. Now let's get to the real nitty-gritty. In terms of being passive, you know, the principal and the dean mentioned reasonable doubt, or they mentioned that concept of reason to search school property. Let me say this, what I know to be true, they do not have the same burden of responsibility that police officers have on the streets. When you are in school property, when you are on school property, they have a lower threshold of what it takes to be able to search you. This is what concerns me, though, what gives me great pause with how the latter events were handled. You're right, the teachers, being a former teacher, they did their jobs. When they noticed something was awry, the writings were on the wall. But then again, we look at this. They had some type of concern to call the parents into the office, right? They obviously saw there were red flags. They obviously saw there was a potential for suicidal ideation. They obviously saw with the things like, help me, my life is useless, blood is everywhere, drawings of a gun. They obviously saw something of grave concern to say, hey, he needs support. Well, if you see something of this magnitude in terms of concern, that, in my professional and personal opinion, would give you reasonable doubt enough to say, well, since we see a weapon, since we see he may potentially harm himself, let's search his locker, let's search his belongings, and at the bare minimum, how about we ask the parents to search him right there and right now, because we have this sense. Again, they're not the police officers on the street who have that higher threshold.
I can't do anything. The parents are saying, I can't do anything. So then what do you do?
As a mandated reporter, when you see signs that this individual has suicidal ideation, I can be legally liable. And also, not only can I lose my license as a psychotherapist, but I can also be jailed if I know that a patient has suicidal ideation and I don't provide a reasonable source of care and get them sources of care and support. But let's look at this for a moment. When he was texting his mom, this seems like it's a pathology here. When he was texting his mom previously, where he said he wasn't feeling well, he said he was hearing voices, he said someone was flushing the toilet. Again, you see these forms of psychosis. He was letting his mother know something was amiss. It took her at least a day or two before she even responded to him. So that is my concern, this very passive form of parenting where you see red flags, he's crying out for help, and you go mute. You were either deaf, dumb, blind, I don't know what it is, but she really went mute here. And her dropping the ball is a part of this kerfuffle that's caused other folks to die. And it's really sad. What did I say before? The main objective of parenting, to secure the welfare of your child first. In most cases, parenting is the easiest job to avoid, the hardest job to do. What I'm concerned about here is it's as if she didn't even or doesn't even want this child, particularly because the school system contacted, the counselor, the teachers, they saw there was a problem with Ethan on multiple accounts. And yet she seems to be very oblivious, very aloof, as if not a problem has occurred. And that's what concerns me. That's what troubles me. I really wonder what has happened to her as a person, as a mother, for her to be so detached, and not just at the crime her child committed, but also at the fact that people are dead. And the last thing I'll say is this: we talk about parental responsibility expectations. I just don't know for the life of me consciously how you can believe that if a parent purchases a gun for a 15-year-old and purchases 100 bullets, how they believe they're not responsible to ensure that gun is cared for responsibly. You can't leave it up to the other parent. You can't leave it up to the kid. His frontal lobe isn't fully developed yet, where he makes his critical decision-making skills. He probably doesn't even go to bed on time or eat healthy, nutritious meals. So how the heck do you expect him to care for a loaded weapon? That's the concern here, the disconnect between her job as a parent and what her child needed. Secure the welfare of the child, and it just didn't happen here on so many instances, and it's deeply troubling.
It absolutely is. What do you think would help in a situation like that if you've got a student who's got one good friend and that friend is gone?
So this is the thing. It's really hard. Like I said before, school counselors have a tough job, and I'm not letting them off because in this case, they really dropped the ball. You know, to secure the welfare of the students first, they dropped the ball. This is really a parenting thing, and that's why this case is so unique, Vinny, is because this case is really about how much are parents responsible for parenting and what falls within their scope of parenting. In this case, I'm concerned by the mother's affect. It's like she didn't even really know the effect of her child losing a friend, his grief, his bereavement. She was aloof. The adjectives I can use are unaware, deaf, dumb, blind, mute. And that's what's concerning here, that she really is not clear on the condition of her child's soul. She's not clear that he is wounded, broken, disheveled. He's clearly had some mental illness issues, clearly some cases of psychosis, clearly he's disoriented in some way. And Mama Bear is dropping the ball because Mama Bear don't know what's going on. It's not a case of being a helicopter parent. Here, Vinny, the helicopter has crashed. Mama Bear does not know what's going on.
All right, stay where you are. We've got our experts with us.
On this case, and Michael McGill, let me start with you. We saw those journal entries from the school shooter in this case where he is asking for help and he's saying my parents won't listen. In your experience as a counselor, how rare or how common is it to have a child recognize that they have a mental health issue and have an unsuccessful plea for help to their parents?
You know, I would say that it's not common at all. This is atypical. This is very abnormal. This speaks to the deficit that's within that family. This speaks to the deficit that's within that school system. But more than anything, it speaks to the deficit that's within Ethan himself. And the challenge I have here, the challenge with this particular case is he repeatedly sent his mother cries for help. He repeatedly asked for intervention. He repeatedly showed something was amiss. And we see it on multiple accounts that the school teachers notify counseling staff that something was amiss. We see on multiple accounts Ethan sent his mother text messages that something was amiss. But it seems as though his cries fell on deaf ears. And one thing that I was really troubled by in this particular case was the fact that how disconnected the mom was, her level of disassociation. And even when she was making calls from jail after she had been arrested, it took her more than 17 times before she actually asked about Ethan's welfare. So that shows you the level of disconnect. I don't know on Mars, Jupiter, Earth, or Pluto, where a parent would be arrested and then it takes them 10, 12, 15 calls to their attorney before they actually ask about the welfare of their child. So that shows you the depth and the volume of this disconnect.
That's an interesting question. Michael McGill Jr., I want to ask your reaction to this historic verdict and if you think there's any difference based on all of what we've seen in this trial between Jennifer Crumbley's culpability and potentially James Crumbley's culpability.
That's a good question. I think it's going to come down to, as the previous individual said before, how likable is James with the jury. You know, the defense has a very unique job here to humanize the defendant, to make them be seen as someone's sister, mother, cousin, brother. And this particular individual, she made this statement that was very clear when she said, I would not have done anything differently. Not only does that dehumanize you, it shows that you lack empathy, care, consideration for all of the lives that were lost. And what I hope that this does is this becomes a clarion call for parents and for schools to really take deeper responsibility for how they show up. It's something that schools have been asking for decades, but that we do have this responsibility to secure the welfare of the child. And what's so fascinating here, that as much as this case is about Jennifer, it's also about the community at large. She's just a microcosm of so many parents and families who are not paying attention. You know, Jennifer Crumbley, as I said yesterday, made dozens of calls to her attorney while she was in jail, but it wasn't until her 14th call that she asked about the welfare of her child. And I don't know what planet, whether you're on Mars or Pluto or Jupiter or Earth or Venus, where that's conscionable. So it seems like though it's the norm for her, because, you know, when the school was adamant about Ethan getting support, they were dismissed. When the child was adamant about him getting support, he was also dismissed. So that's the deeply troubling piece to me here about really connecting with the hearts of parents. Will you pay attention? So we'll see the way that the father comports himself at trial as if he is alert, aware, and involved, and does he pay attention?
Now, a lot of what you're saying, Michael, has to do with almost
skills.
And Michael, you get the final word, schools. Do you think that counselors and the officials that are inside the school, if they are going to make any changes in light of a case like this?
You know, one can only hope, but we thought that with Columbine. You know, I transitioned out of the schools and I'm now doing more family work, but it's the same things that I've been seeing for years, where we have a situation or issue, it'll open up people's eyes for the moment, and then they go back on their stupor. Sometimes they go back to being deaf, dumb, and blind. I hope it's not the case, but I do hope that it awakens school leaders, you know, in more affluent areas who have more privilege and who believe this concept of privilege, that it can't happen here. Because I can guarantee you, as an official who's been a mental health clinician and a school counselor in inner city schools, there are folks who will check backpacks every single day. If there is even the sniff of a threat, backpacks are checked, or police officers are called where dogs can come to check for weapons. And then if they find that they have probable cause, they will check your items. So I do hope that it opens up the eyes and ears of school officials everywhere, that if you think something is possible, if you hear something is possible, then you do something about it. And for parents, you know, if a minor, the thing that I stick to is, if a minor cannot purchase a weapon on their own, but their parent instead chooses to purchase the weapon as a gift for the minor, then that parent must take some responsibility for how the minor comports themselves with the weapon. There has to be this sense of reasonability the age of even being able to get a weapon. So I hope everyone's eyes are open to this.
A weighty decision by this jury. We'll continue to unpack it as we look now towards the sentencing and the trial of